Welcome to another episode of Coffee with Karim. I am your host, Karim Sirajuddin. In the last episode I had with Dr. Johnathan A.C. Brown, we discussed his article on yaqininstitute.org, LGBTQ and Islam Revisited, The Days of the Donald. And in this episode, I actually have Dr. Shadee Elmasry, who was co-author of that article and responded to Dr. Jonathan's positions. So, alhamdulillah, I had the privilege of having Dr. Shadee on to discuss his points, and we break that down in this episode. Furthermore, Dr. Shadee provides some tips around ways forward to navigate the socio-political landscape of our time, how we as a Muslim community need to put first things first and set priorities. He also branches off into other beneficial topics such as work ethic, parenting, a simmering book that discusses the beauty of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and knowing His names and attributes. I hope you enjoyed the show. Don't forget to leave us a 5-star review on iTunes today. Support this podcast at patreon.com/coffeewithkareem. Links are in the show and descriptions of each episode. You can spare $1 for your bro Kareem. Come on, help us keep brewing. If you find value in this podcast, please support us today and become a patron. Thanks for tuning in to the Coffee with Kareem podcast. Welcome to another episode of Coffee with Kareem. I have Dr. Shadee Elmasry on the show today. Dr. Shadee, thank you so much for coming on.
It's my pleasure. And I'd seen some of your things about your podcast around, even though I haven't gotten around to listening to all the episodes. But inshallah, we'll get to that. But thanks for having me on.
Karamakumullah. Thank you, sir. Well, Dr. Shadee, what's interesting is the last episode I released, I actually talked to Dr. Johnathan A.C. Brown, also a beloved scholar in our community, and he wrote an article on Yaqeen Institute. We'll have the link of that in the show, called LGBTQ and Islam Revisited, where he discusses how to navigate the modern landscape around Muslims and the Muslim activism and socio-political activism and the LGBTQ phenomena. And so he offers about 4 positions there. And then you actually responded to his position. So I wanted to have you on today to first and foremost talk a little bit more about your points and positions and why you felt the way you did. But let me just quickly summarize the points of Dr. Brown. So the 4 positions he proposed and how to navigate the LGBTQ space was: number 1, unquestioned embrace. Number 2 was rejectionism. Number 3 was neutralism. And then the 4th one was an acronym he called RACIO, which stands for Rights, Affirmation, Common Cause, Islamic Orthodoxy. So those of you who haven't read the article, please check that out. I'm not going to be able to break down every single position thoroughly, but we will get a general sense as we discuss Dr. Shadee's responses. So the first one, Dr. Shadee, was the unquestioned embrace. And, you had a very short and clear response to this, that not only is this point erroneous, this position is erroneous, it actually puts one outside of Islam. And you made the argument that based on making what Allah has established as haram into something halal is automatically necessitates of a type of kufr, if not an extremely risky situation. Can you tell us more about unquestioned embrace and why that is a very erroneous position and how it could take you out of Islam?
Okay, so to start, a lot of people don't realize that Islam, like everything else, it has its own set of parameters, right? And it's not just subjective that whatever I want it to be. I mean, vegetarianism is not like this, right? You can't say, well, I eat meat, but I'm a vegetarian. It doesn't work like that. Being a capitalist or a free market type or a liberal also doesn't work like this. You can't say I'm a liberal, but only whites. My club it's a liberal club, but for whites only, because all these terms have meanings, right? Likewise, maybe some people haven't. You have to give American Muslims a break in a sense, because a lot of people have been, brought up in the country and that maybe haven't even been to any type of class at all. So Islam is governed by the Quran. It's defined by the Quran, right? And Muslims are not a race or ethnicity. It's a commitment to a set of principles and ideas and practices. And Allah Ta'ala is the one who said, "Huwa sammakum al-muslimun." He's the one who named you sammakum al-muslimin. He's the one who named you the Muslims. So, and sometimes that goes back to Prophet Ibrahim alayhi salam. Some people say that the huwa, he here, he named you the Muslims, goes back to the Prophet Ibrahim alayhi salam. And others say, no, it's Allah. Either way, the name Muslims is not something we gave to ourselves. It's something Allah gave to people who follow His book and follow His Prophet. So any contradiction of any explicit verse in the Quran or any hadith that is explicit, okay, that has been defined as sound, right, and widespread and repeated over and over, okay, like when the Prophet ﷺ, he has certain things that he said once, or it's transmitted to us from like maybe one Sahabi, and other things the Prophet, peace be upon him, has taught it over and over and over 23 years. So we could call that a doctrine. It's something we're obligated to believe in. If we don't believe in them, then we can't call ourselves Muslims, right? So vegetarianism has a couple doctrines, like you can't eat meat.
By definition.
By definition. Likewise, the Quran, the Muslim does not contradict his Prophet. He does not contradict the Quran. So if you didn't know something was in the Quran and you contradicted it, then we say Allah is forgiving. Allah doesn't put people to hell on ignorance. He punishes people, or we should say, let's just say, He takes people to account, okay, based upon what they know and what they actively reject. So if a Muslim has grown up, let's say, in the society, and has not come to realize that the Quran itself does give us some parameters on sexuality, we'll say, okay, listen, that's okay. People make mistakes. People don't know everything. And in this society, it's very fathomable that a Muslim kid who never was given any education on his religion, except that he's called a Muslim, well, to be honest, he might not know that, right? I'm being really liberal and type of sort of generous here about it. So, well, now we're making them aware that in the Quran, Allah prohibited, right, to act upon pleasure towards the same gender. To have a desire, he never prohibited. In fact, we aren't taken into account for desire. You can desire what you want, or not. Sorry, that's not the right way to say it. People desire what they desire. You're only taken into account if you encourage that desire by acting upon it, right? Like you dwell upon it and you act upon it. So now that people know that, now that Muslims know that, and the Prophet ﷺ has many, many, many hadiths, and the entire ummah before, I guess, the last decade or so, all of the scholars until now recognize the meaning of these verses as being a prohibition on acting upon same-sex attraction, okay, and amongst other sexual attractions that we're not allowed to act upon.
Right. So if I understood you correctly, I want to summarize each segment you give here. So you're saying that sometimes, and it's most likely the case, especially in, let's say, Muslim communities in the United States, where we just didn't have the right education, so we didn't have that knowledge. And therefore, if I was somebody who never graduated beyond, Sunday school Islam, then, and I think, well, everyone around me is telling me, this is acceptable, and I kind of go along with the group, that young teenager or college kid may not necessarily be, oh, this person has now left the fold of Islam, because they just didn't know any better. They just went along with all these other Muslims who were telling them, oh, this is okay.
In my experience in the past, when I started really getting exposed to people again after having been away for a while and sort of been in a cave, in a cocoon, I was, sort of just shocked by a lot of things that were going on and being said. And after having lived now a couple, years with people and interacting with youth, I don't say any of my beliefs changed or that I tolerate anything more, but I'm a lot more patient and willing to, give excuses to people and see that the reality that many people are facing is very different than the reality of the minority of people in the world, or in America, or in the West, that Allah has blessed them with the ability to be around Muslims from birth. Even I wasn't around practicing Muslims from birth, right? Not even bulk of my childhood wasn't, right? In my around the age of 11, we learned that there's something called obligatory prayer. Before that, we thought it was just a blessing that you did it before an exam or something. So I'm a lot more cognizant that people are coming from completely different backgrounds and completely different experiences. That doesn't change that I still believe that there are principles that are non-negotiable, but I'm a lot more willing to, recognize that people have these situations. So yeah, maybe people, you can't assume that everyone knows even the most basic things, which to me, I'm thinking about myself. I'm thinking about this. I'm like, this is insane. The world that we're in right now is insane. But once you're in that world, your beliefs don't change, but your recognition that people are living such different and such completely different lives that you have to be a little bit more, softer spoken in the way that you transmit this, because sometimes they truly are innocent, right? And some of these people out there that are promoting some bizarre beliefs, I would say that I would give them time of having heard the message, discussed it, understood it, before I really would, get upset and get angry, right? Because that's the point I'm at right now, because I've seen so much, I would call it trauma. And I would the way that levels of sort of being part of a religion and being that ignorant about it, and then being faced with a society that's going the exact opposite way, right? It is traumatic because it's a rupture. Your religion and your culture should go hand in hand, but that's not the case. It's going the opposite way. And it's very hard for a 12-year-old, 13, 15, 17-year-old to have to deal with that themselves, right? Which is why I always make myself available to people, as much as I can on social media. I'll answer anyone's message, right? Because I know that they're going through, some hard times.
Okay, but let me ask you this, because some people might go, well, all right, so there's the ignorance clause. We give people the benefit of the doubt, and obviously if they don't have the right tarbiyah, upbringing, development of Islamic knowledge, there's going to be just things you can't expect them to fully grasp or understand. But let's say you have, because there are also people that say, no, this isn't a matter of not knowing. I know. But I think the interpretation needs to be rebooted, right? Because there's volumes, I've seen like this very big book, for example, that's talks about homosexuality in Islam, and it's like 800 pages, and it's just like trying to totally reinterpret everything.
Yeah, I read it. It's full of nonsense.
And so like, what do you say to that? Because like I was speaking to Dr. Muhammad Ghilan, who also has a podcast, and maybe you're aware of his work, and he was, sharing with me that one of these college discussions he was at, and right at the end of, they popped up like, oh, what's the Islamic position on homosexuality? And he was like, man, they brought this up right at the end when you can't really unpack it. So he gave the best answer he could, and then the moderator like took the microphone and was like, thank you for your answer, and that is more from an orthodox position, but modernist Muslims do find it acceptable. And he was like about to fall out of his chair, and it's just like, how do you deal with stuff like that when people are just saying, no, I'm using Islam too to justify things that were never justified or considered halal before?
Well, I mean, in today's world, you have to wonder if facts have any weight anymore, right? And in the liberal side of the spectrum, they go after Trump for not respecting any facts. Well, they're the first people not to respect facts, right? I mean, it is a fact that marriage used to have a definition that was universal, that involved genders, right? Men and women. That was a fact, okay? For how long has this country been? When was the Constitution written? How many years has it been? I mean, from then until whenever Obergefell was, that was a fact, right? It was a fact. So facts are things that are no longer really respected. So when you have people growing up in a society where facts are not respected, then, I mean, Trump came along and he picked his own facts, right?
Right.
So, I mean, why should your facts be any better than my facts, right? So when you have a world where both sides of the cultural divide, the liberals and the conservatives, they both have no respect for the fact that crosses their whims, right? It's all based on whims. Then you have Muslims growing up in that society. Well, they too as well have learned that logic and facts and evidence and language really weigh nothing against my whims, right? And that's where the Prophet ﷺ gave us a hadith. إذا رأيت شحا مطاعا وهوى متبعا والدنيا مؤثرة وإعجاب كل ذي رأي برأيه, right? And what did the Prophet say at the end of the hadith? Right, فَعَلَيْكَ بِخَاصَّةِ نَفْسِكَ. Right. So I don't look at it as one mas'ala anymore, like this is one issue. I actually look at it as an epistemological issue. Where is language appreciated here? Because if it is, then your argument for same-sex acting upon same-sex, let's say anal sex. Let's put it as like Johnathan Brown. He says, let's just talk about one thing. Let's say anal sex, right? Whether for male or females, it is not going to fly. The evidence is all against you. Same-sex acts are not going to fly. In the Quran, it clearly says, right, that do you desire the take your passions towards men, right, with the exception to women, right? So there's no wiggle room unless you what they call torturing the text. Okay. So that's what they do. And so my point is, look, it is an epistemological thing. I don't think that you guys care about facts anymore, right? And language and methodologies. So I don't even know if it's worthy even talking.
Well, let's check out the second position that you responded to in that article, LGBTQ and Islam Revisited. So the second position was rejectionism. And the way Dr. Brown framed it was, that there's going to be a group of Muslims that just say, look, we don't want to have anything to do with this movement, and let's stay away from it. And sometimes that can be done in a peaceful fashion or even a harsh fashion. And you kind of responded to that, and I'm not giving Dr. Brown all his due. So again, let's read the article, those who are listening. But basically, you responded by saying that when it comes to this position, just because we don't accept activity that we know is haram according to Islam, that is not in any way, shape, or form synonymous with we have to hate them and oppress them or harm them, right? But rather we have to support any cause that is not leading to a contradiction in our own principles. And you gave the example of if you knew there was a homosexual starving on the corner of your neighborhood, it would be an obligation for you to feed him. It doesn't matter what his sexuality or religion is. It's about being human. Mm-hmm. So can you kind of clarify for this, how do we know the line between taking care of humans and creation, which is an Islamic obligation, and when we can't go further than that? Because, as you said, political and religious beliefs are supporting and feeding off of each other. So how can we at once help LGBTQ as a movement, yet still say, as Dr. Brown was arguing, you can do this for political and social benefit, but you have to make it very clear that we morally don't accept this type of activity? How do we even reconcile that?
Okay, so I see two things here. The first thing is most people, from my experience talking about the LGBT, they conflate two things. The one is the protection. It's really maybe three things. The protection of their sort of right not to be abused, right? Not to be attacked, not to be cursed in the streets or whatever, right? That's one thing. The second thing is any statement on the morality of the thing, and the third thing being the advocacy of their rights to have, let's say, what they say, like dignity and marriage and social acceptance, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Right? So where we can go is the first one in that listing, where many people misunderstand this. They think, oh, because you're against what they do, therefore you also don't have a problem with them being, abused, killed, attacked, whatever, right? So that's where it's always like shady. It's like confusing for people because we don't stand for that. I mean, I don't stand for the Trinity. How does that mean that? Does that mean that I'm out there to attack Catholics, right? So why should that assumption be made? So that assumption is often made. I get to feel it's made unfairly, right? To suppress any discussion, right? So that's the one thing. The second thing is the morality issue, which I don't think that me and Dr. Brown in the paper had any differences on. The third one being to support their rights. Now, in Islam, legality doesn't matter where you are. It doesn't matter whether the reference point is Islam. It doesn't matter whether the reference point is the Constitution. It doesn't matter if it's the private sector. All right? If you support something morally, you support it wherever you are. If you don't support it morally, you don't support it wherever you are. So you don't have one morality at work and another morality at home. You might have one outfit at work, right? Like you're not going to go to work with a thobe, right? But if you go to Mecca, you might wear a thobe, right? So that's fine. You might not talk about what you talk about in your podcast if you were, at Staples making photocopies, but you'll talk about it with your friends over coffee. So that stuff is fine. You can wear different hats at different times. لِكُلِّ مَكَانٍ مَقَالٍ. However, Muslim does not have two moralities, right? He doesn't have a morality on Capitol Hill and a morality in the masjid. He doesn't have truth and falsehood in the masjid and a different set of truths and falsehoods at work. Okay? So the idea that Allah tells us in all stages, وَتَعَاوَنُوا عَلَى الْبِرِّ وَالتَّقْوَى وَلَا تَعَاوَنُوا عَلَى الْإِثْمِ وَالْعُدْوَانِ. So come together, unify, and what do they say? Stand in solidarity, right? Isn't that their phrase? Stand in solidarity, right? Well, that's like ta'awun. I think the idea of solidarity is one of the best translations of ta'awun, right? So Allah tells us, ta'awanu ala al-birr wa taqwa. So stand in solidarity or support or gather, right, for that which is considered by God and His Prophet to be good, okay, and considered by the believers to be good and pious, okay? It's based upon some evidence, based upon some piety. So for that reason, right, we cannot separate our truths and our moralities. The moment we do that, let me tell you, the game is over. The moment you do that once, you have gamed over, okay? Because you've set the precedent that this could keep happening over and over and over. And I said many times, because when a couple incidents happened against gays and homosexuals, Muslims were putting up crescent moons with the rainbow flag on them, okay? So I said, all right then, what happens if there comes a day where an extremist Muslim group, right, goes into a Satanist, or whatever they call their places of gathering, and shoots them up, right? What happens on the day where Satanists become in society totally morally accepted, right? Not morally, even socially acceptable. What happens when it starts to be cool, right? So, and then all of a sudden, some extremist Muslim comes and fires at them and kills them. All right. What are you going to do then? Well, you're setting the precedent now, right? So you would, by your precedent, you'd have a crescent moon with some horns or something, right? So my point is that the Muslim's truth and morality has to be one, even if he's wearing different hats in different places. And sometimes you don't say all the truth. You're not obligated to say all the truth, right? All the time. But you don't contradict your truth. I mean, when I go and I'm an assistant coach in a soccer league, And I have friends there that I see every Saturday. I mean, like, we don't hang out. Besides Saturday, we see each other, and we see each other at practice, and we hang out, right? And we chat, and we sort of like each other's company, I guess, right? After a couple years of being on the same team. But you think I'm talking dawah? Like, do you think I'm going in a thobe? Right? And he's like,
handing out pamphlets every Saturday.
You're just being a dad. You're being a soccer dad. And he's being a soccer dad, right? And you're being an assistant coach. And that's it. And he's being an assistant coach. So that's it. So you don't have to say all the truth all the time, right? But I'll never contradict what I would believe in and hold at home or in the masjid. I won't laugh at a joke, right, that I wouldn't laugh at in the masjid, or that I don't believe in. Okay? And if I did, I would make tawbah. Right? I would consider myself that I'd done something really bad, and I would make tawbah. Right? So that's the idea. Cognitive dissonance is going to come to the Muslim community if we start talking like this. All right? If we politically support someone or a cause that contradicts our book, right? Cognitive dissonance is a disease that will grow in our minds because we're saying two opposite things in two opposite places. Okay. So that's basically, and the hadith, the ayah for that is وَتَعَاوَنُوا عَلَى الْبِرِّ وَالتَّقْوَى. It's absolute. Okay? وَلَا تَعَاوَنُوا عَلَى الْإِثْمِ وَالْعُدْوَانِ. No matter what happens, do not support something that your God prohibits. I don't care what it is.
So for like the example in the Sirah where some of the non-Muslims wanted to kind of compromise, like, hey, you worship our gods for a year, we'll worship your God, and, let's all benefit from, making some money here at the pilgrimage. That was something that actually happened, and the Prophet ﷺ was not allowed to do that.
Yeah, was not allowed to do that. And by the way, we have to study the bad and the forbidden as much as we study the good and the recommended and all those things which we love. Like, we love to be a people of charity. We love to talk about that. That's great. Why is it that we have to study what we cannot stand for? Because you may accidentally, if you don't know the bad, you may accidentally commingle and mix the good and the bad, therefore nullifying your good. Okay, and the Prophet, Hudayfa ibn Yaman, is the one who said, the Sahabi who said, everyone talks about the good, but I ask about the evil, right? I want to know about what's evil, because that's what I want to avoid, okay? And, the best offense is a good defense, okay? And you look at it's NFL season, right? It's like week 3, okay? Look at what they're all saying. If you're sputtering, if your team is not moving, what's the first thing that a coach does? Go back on defense. Start playing defense, right? If you're just not getting wins, you don't know what's going on, right? Go to defense, okay? Work on the defense. Likewise, when Muslims need to develop and need to kick it into a gear and things are not, turning out the way we wanted them to turn out, what do? We go back to the books of law and the book of doctrine, and we get back to basics. And we submit to what Allah has forbidden, right? And told us to not believe and not to do. Okay, so these things make people think, oh my God, it's just talking about prohibitions and hell. Well, listen, right? It's not something that we're talking about every day, right? It's just that some people in the community have passed on certain barriers, and we have to say, oh, hold up, don't pass those barriers. Just like the Prophet, peace be upon him, said, they're his likeness of a people. Some people are at the bottom of the boat, and some people are at the top of the boat. The people at the bottom of the boat, they said, hey, listen, in order to get water, we have to go upstairs. Well, why don't we not go upstairs, right? Why don't we just get water by putting a hole in the boat and getting the water from there and drinking it from there, okay? So the Prophet ﷺ said, if the people at the top of the boat don't stop them, the people at the bottom of the boat, from doing that, then they're all going to drown. So it's not like I sit here and I want to talk about what's haram every single day, but being that certain people have brought it up, right? We got to say, hold on, this is a limit here you can't pass by.
Right. And sometimes, certainly when there's too much emphasis of a thing, the natural reaction is to slide over to the other side of the spectrum. So if you always grew up hearing haram, haram, you're never allowed to do, you just get tired of it and you don't want to hear it anymore, right? But at the same time, you're making the point that negation, and we even find this in the Shahada, right? La ilaha illallah. Negation is actually what leads to confirmation. You always have to know the total spectrum. You can't just live with everything that you know you can do or like to do. You also have to know what you shouldn't do and what's harmful, or else you don't have a holistic picture.
That's totally true. I mean, you got to be completely, you have to have a holistic picture. And a lot of people, let's be honest, they came to America and didn't know much, okay, about their religion, about their deen, right? And what happened is, what they do know is that you can't do certain things, right? And if you study a lot, and I've been writing a book actually, which it's taken me a while, and it's sort of marinating. And the book is called The Galaxy of Divine Love. And this book, it's basically everything about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? That for people to really dive into it, and really, when you read about Allah ta'ala and his attributes and his names and himself, you find in it generosity, 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 like 12 attributes of generosity. And then like one attribute of firmness. And then like 13 different shades of forgiveness. And then one, like Sari'ul Hisab, right? Speedy in his judgment. And Shadidul Iqab, right? And then you keep going, different shades of his creation, how he creates, right? And then one thing about how he gives death as well. So the bulk of the attributes that Allah has revealed to us, I would say like more than 75%, more of three out of 4, like more like 89.9%, 92.8% are all on the beautiful side of the spectrum.
Yeah.
And very few are on the shadid side of things. So if the Islam that we pass on to our children and in our communities should likewise reflect that.
No. Just like every surah in the Quran except for one begins with Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, even though Allah has many more names than that, he could have chosen to choose different names before every surah.
Exactly.
Right? But he chose ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. The Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, his name literally means you can't stop praising the man. Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. And yet Allah says, وَمَا أَرْسَلْنَاكَ إِلَّا رَحْمَةً لِلْعَالَمِينَ. Even though he could have been Huda or Nur or a bunch of other things. But still Allah saying, you're the rahmah to all that exists. And it's beautiful.
It is beautiful. And subhanAllah, the thing is that when you look at the Prophet, peace be upon him, it's the same thing. It's the same thing. It's like generosity to his companions, forgiveness, overlooking, smiles. It's like a list of like 90 incidents that are all generous and kind. And then one incident in which he had to take a stand. Right? And so if our Islam doesn't reflect that percentage, then you're going to have people who really can't stand it. And I believe that those realities are the ones in which the Prophet ﷺ said, the deen will be to people like holding a hot coal. Okay? And the reason is that you've given no nur. There's no nur. There is no dhikr. There is no sa'adah. There's no happiness. Quran tells us, فَبِفَضْلِ اللَّهِ وَبِرَحْمَتِهِ فَبِذَلِكَ فَلْيَفْرَحُوا. They should be happy. Right? And we've inherited a type of religious culture where celebrations are like forbidden. Right? It's unbelievable. Right? There's like, you don't want to be happy. It's like, you don't get this, like the soft power of this psychology. And the Prophet ﷺ one time, some people were singing, and it was like shortly before an ensuing battle with the enemy. Okay. And, or they thought that there was a battle going to occur. And some people were singing, some of the youth were singing some song. And some Sahabi said, stop this. We're about to have a battle. And the Prophet ﷺ said, leave them, because when the enemy hears this, it strikes their hearts where the swords can't strike. Right? In other words, when your enemy sees that you're happy with what you have, right? That's far more powerful than being strong. And how did America spread its wings? Not by, well, yeah, of course, by hard power, but also by soft power. Like, what is our export? Our export is entertainment and culture, right? And when the people's impression of Americans, at least let's say in the 80s and 90s, was that these were some of the happiest people in the world. Right? Not that they were powerful, not that they were efficient like the Germans and the Swiss, nor strong in whatever like the Russians. No, their attribute that they had was that they were happy. Americans are happy, right? So that's something that we need to actually, we need to fix that in our Islam. And all of the people who are, making such big hypes over such things as the Mawlid and whatnot, you really, please, you got to wake up. You got to realize the importance of being happy with the Prophet and making a connection. And we say, oh, well, why does it have to be that day? Well, okay, let's think about this now. Let's just think about this with our intellect. They say, well, a person selected that day. Why does it have to be that day? Let it be another day. All right, are you going to set a day? Right? Because the day you set, it doesn't really make a difference, right? Because if you're saying, well, human beings set this time of Rabi'at al-Awwal to be happy with the Prophet, well, it doesn't have to be that day. All right, well, if you set a day, well, it doesn't have to be that day either, right? So if you set a day, well, let's make the time to remember the Prophet to be on September 30th. Well, why does it have to be that day either? So why don't you just stick with the day that the whole ummah, has been doing? I mean, it gets to be a type of polemical issue, the Mawlid. But the point is, there's got to be a lot of happiness in our religion. And if there's not a lot of happiness and generosity in our religion, then we have not reflected it well, and we should expect, therefore, rejection.
SubhanAllah. Now I just want to keep going with this direction, but I do want to wrap up the article, and then we can maybe get more into the names and attributes, Dr. Shadee, and how we can revive this very important point. The color, the happiness, the zest of our deen that we're sometimes missing out on. And I got a true story about McDonald's that I'll remind me to tell you about.
Okay.
So going back to kind of the position, the article, rejectionism, my main takeaway from that is, look, we have to fight against human oppression, period. Whether they're Satanists, they're Muslim, they're Christian, they're LGBTQ, there's nothing wrong with that. It's the issue is when we undermine or water down our principles for some seemingly social, political benefit. And the other point that came up for me, and I was reading your response, is, one of the main arguments of LGBTQ is that this is something you're born with and you can't change. But I mean, I studied psychology, and on episode 27, I spoke to a clinical psychologist that actually provides therapy for people with same-sex attraction. And I read verbatim from the American Psychological Association on the section of sexual orientation. And there is no scientific conclusion or evidence to suggest that sexual orientation is determined by genetics. So if that's the basis of the movement or the argument, and it's not even scientifically verified, then why are we also getting swooped up into all of this for something that isn't actually verified scientifically?
Well, the funny thing is that the latest wave is all about actually the opposite, that everything is a choice, right? And it sort of completely negates and goes against the concept of being biologically forced into something, and no action at all whatsoever is something that is sort of forced upon a person. I mean, these are acts. We're talking about an action. You're never forced to do an action. So I mean, the logic behind it of, well, it's like being left-handed. Well, but we have evidence about left-handed, right? There's evidence for that. And like you said, do we even have a gene for same-sex, for heterosexuality?
Not to my knowledge.
Yeah, so I mean, we don't even have a gene for that. Okay, so if we don't have a gene for that, right, then I don't understand how we're going to have a gene for anything else. So that whole line of thinking of it being biological. I think it's been refuted, right? And it's now just being passed down as a doctrine, right? Just like natural selection is being passed down as a doctrine. And they don't even realize is in the high churches of these Darwinist theories and these conferences that they hold, people on the street, people in the regular walks of life don't recognize that it is completely, right? Completely being questioned. Natural select, not by intelligent design thinkers.
No, by atheists.
Secular, by atheists.
There's books on this, like Darwin's Black Box, and
yeah. There, I mean, even one of their phrases now, and they even came up with one of these phrases, like natural selection may explain for you the survival of the fittest, but not the arrival of the fittest, right? And that's like one of these seemingly corny phrases, but that's actually put out by them. That's like one of their statements. And one guy collected 100 separate academic articles by atheist, not even neo-Darwinists anymore, all unsatisfied with the explanation of natural selection as, the explanation of things. And for us, natural selection is supposedly, if you think about it, it's a non-entity, right? It's a complete abstract entity. It's not alive, but yet it possesses knowledge and it takes action, if you think about it. But it doesn't possess life. I mean, which is a complete contradiction. And it selects for the survival of the fittest. However, it also acts with random mutation, right? So how are those two things themselves need explanation? Random mutation on one side, and yet the driving force is the survival of the fittest. So that's not random, right? Survival of the fittest. Survival is not random. That's you've actually put something that's up there. And anyway, that's a whole nother subject. But
Daniel Hakikachu and I talked about that in one of the episodes, all of these holes, and it's a very interesting discussion for those interested.
We're going to come up on interesting time because natural selection and the LGBTQ movement are both going to be shaken up in the next few years. The LGBTQ movement, the lesbian side of it, some of their leaders are really at odds with the transgender leaders. There's a civil war going on, right? And we're going to be like the person just sitting back and watching because there is a war going on. And I was checking up on some of these, more niche websites that people from these spectrums read, and it's vehement and it's getting nasty between the LGBT and the transgender. I mean, the lesbian movement and the transgender movement.
Yeah, I wasn't aware of that. So what's the big beef, basically?
Well, the beef is that the lesbians, the basis of the lesbian movement, right, very much like the basis of the feminist movement, is heavily grounded in being a woman.
Mm-hmm.
So they're taking offense with someone who's actually not a woman and saying he's a woman, right? And then, right, if that person says they're a woman but they're straight, they want to box them in as homosexuals. So if you're a guy, like let's say you're a dude, and then you're saying, well, actually I'm a woman, right? And then, but I'm still straight. So I'm a woman now that's a transgender woman who likes men. Well, they want to say, you're not one of us because you didn't go through what we went through as girls, right? You're a guy who's gay, right? Who's dressing like a woman or behaving like a woman or whatever. So it's really the LGBT, the lesbian side of things. They are grounded in femininity. That's really the root of it. And for someone to then claim otherwise, right, is, I guess, bothering them, right? And it's funny because I have a friend who's a Muslim. He's a convert. And this is actually one of the most hilarious things. I mean, I was laughing when he told me. So he's a convert, and he has two aunts. And these two aunts are lesbians. Okay, and they come over, and they're old school. So they don't push their lesbianism on him. They're just lesbians in themselves. They don't care that to bring it up every 2 seconds. So, but the Republicans, and they can't tolerate any of this new transgender stuff, right? And they were saying, listen, we can't tolerate this new stuff. We're just old school, right?
Right.
Traditional lesbians, right? So here you have now curmudgeonly old women who are lesbians, right? And they're old school and traditional and conservative, right? And to them, this stuff is all a bunch of nonsense, right? So it's just funny to see like how, these people who are just destroying all forms of tradition in the past are now viewing themselves as traditional, right, and old school.
Right. Yeah, it's very interesting. So to kind of wrap up the article, I'm going to jump to the section, The Way Forward, where you provide a couple of tips. The first one is respectful disbelief and non-support. And what I took away from that is that we have to respect other people's ways of life, but that doesn't necessitate changing our beliefs in order to feel like we fit in. And you use the verse, Quran chapter 6, verse 108, do not curse those they worship besides Allah, so that they do not curse Allah out of animosity and with ignorance. And so you said we have here a policy given to us by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, la ikraha fid deen, of course, and this is what informs our above position of withholding support while neither oppressing nor insulting.
Yeah, I would say that I wouldn't necessarily respect the way people live. I mean, some ways people live, I have no respect for it. I might respect them because we're taught to be respectful people. Likewise, when the Quran says don't curse the idols, he's not saying respect the idols.
Right. Just don't curse them or attack them.
For a reason, right? Because it's going to be reciprocal. Right? They will then curse your God. And your God is true and theirs is false. Right? So I respect the reality and the haqiqah that Allah Ta'ala has given everybody the freedom to choose their deeds, right? To choose their deeds. Whoever wants to believe, believe, right? وَمَنْ شَاءَ فَلْيَكْفُرْ فَلْيَكْفُرْ, right? That's on you.
Right. قُلْ يَا أَيُّهَا الْكَافِرُونَ.
Yeah. قُلْ يَا أَيُّهَا الْكَافِرُونَ. So I respect the people. We respect individuals. I don't necessarily respect all the choices they make, right? Because in that is a sort of acceptance, moral acceptance. When I say I respect that choice, no, I respect that you all, this life is a free world, right? You can do what you want. I respect that reality that Allah has given everyone.
Right. So basically, the free will principle that you can worship what you want to worship. I worship what I want to worship.
Exactly.
But it doesn't mean they're on the same playing field, so to speak.
Yeah, exactly. I have my opinions on those. But we are people who live in the same, cul-de-sac maybe, right? And same world. And we're not going to be able to actually go on living like this if we're not, hurling curses at one another. And that's what Surah Al-Kafirun is saying. Okay? Like, you worship your thing, you do your thing, right? And we'll do our thing. Doesn't mean I approve of your thing.
Right. But we approve that everybody has the space to do their thing and Allah will judge. Because this is a very important point that you mentioned, is that everything that we understand has to be in context of our origin and our return, and that there will be a day of accountability for everything. And this has to influence how we act and think now in the present.
Totally. We are judged by everything. We're not just judged by what we think we're going to be judged by. We're going to be judged by our political stances. We're going to be judged by, we're going to be judged by the jokes we laugh out at work, right? What we say at work, the contracts we agree to at work. We're going to be judged by everything. So we have to stay consistent. And by the way, this is extremely important for mental health. Like cognitive dissonance happens because of this, because you have to live two different lives, right? Which I'm very sympathetic, right, to many Muslim youth who suffer from this from another angle, which is not what you're talking about, but it's another angle of them actually having same-sex attractions, right? And we say about that we say that happens, and it's a test. They say, well, it's a test. Is it a test like men looking at women? No, because a man can get married. So the test of a man having sexual attraction to a woman or a woman to a man is a temporary test because both can get married.
Right, but once you're married, though, Dr. Shadee, it's still a test for men and women because you could still desire other women or other men while you're married, and shar'an, that would be something you can't engage with.
That's totally true. And also, I like to give the example of blindness. It's a permanent test, right? So likewise, a Muslim man or a Muslim girl who is tested by same-sex attraction, well, we say to you, look, your test is a very tough test. It is a permanent test, right? It's not something that is going to change. And oftentimes, I don't know if attraction can change. I really don't know if that can change. Allah knows.
Well, there is data that suggests it can.
It can change. Good. Okay, good. But point being is that we do treat it like a test, and we believe that it's a test. And back to the political element of things, I want to see as much. Dr. Brown's Johnathan is one of my friends, and anytime he's in Jersey, we hang out. And whenever I'm down in Washington, I try to call him up, and we text on a regular basis. And he's someone I have a ton of respect for his work on Sahih Bukhari and pretty much all his work. I mean, pretty much all the work he's done. And he just actually texted me recently really just today. I was telling him how gorgeous the autumns in Georgetown are. Because I lived there for 2 springs, falls, 2 autumns, and he texted me back. He told me he just recently finished his book on slavery, which is really going to be exciting to read. But I wonder what would be his rebuttal to what I had to say, right?
Well, why don't we get both of you on and get some coffee brewing?
Yeah, I mean, I'll do it. But I'm just curious, like when he, saw my rebuttals, and he knew, because by the way, the whole article was like a discussion we had on a bus.
Oh, fascinating.
Yeah, me and him were on a bus. The bus got stuck. We ended up having like a 6-hour trip from Istanbul to some other city in Turkey, which I can't even remember what it's called. But anyway, we ended up talking, and I think this ended up being one of the discussions we had at some point. So then I think he got the idea, let's put it on paper for people to read. So
yeah, it's a really great article. Again, I advise everyone to check it out. The last 2 points Dr. Shadee shares about the way forward is honesty leads to originality, and number 3, avoiding tunnel vision. Yeah. And from what I understood there, honesty leads to originality is, you said, one of the highlights was the way forward can only be forged by those who are honest about the truth, and they stick to what the Quran and Sunnah says, and they try to live that and manifest it in their society. Yes, they may be mocked, they may be tossed aside, they may be even persecuted, but if we remain steadfast and resilient, the tawfiq and nasib comes from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And we may even guide people that we never expected were looking for the guidance, because now there's that nur for them to see and give them that vision that if we put that light out, how will they even access that? That was point number 2. And the last point that if you'd like to comment on was avoiding tunnel vision, which is that we have to remember not to get stuck and welded to some of these, higher, creme brulee discussions of universities or the elite, but we got to get back down to the ground and do what the prophets always did, which was take care of the needy and the poor and the oppressed and the orphans. And this is where, we really walk the talk, so to speak. Any final comments on those 2 points for way forward?
Yeah, I think that we totally, with those of us, and I spent about 15 years in the university environment, and there was a period of time that I was there where I fell into that sort of tunnel vision, and you start believing that environment reflects the world. And it doesn't. It so doesn't. In fact, when you leave that environment, you realize that they're in the minority. Right? They're very influential over time. The ideas of academics, when they trickle down, they become very influential. However, they are a minority in the world. Okay, and we have to realize that. And sometimes, large swaths of people can be affected while these academics still think you're backwards or what have you. And I tend to always feel that they're filled with a lot of smart fools. And the smart fool is someone who is really good at one thing, not realizing where he is in the bigger picture. All right. And there are dumb geniuses, which is the type of person who really doesn't have any technical skill of any sort, but can walk into a room and pretty much figure out what's going on in the whole environment, right? And can manipulate it and can do what he wants in it, right? I think Trump falls into that category, right? I think even Steve Jobs, to a degree, falls into that category. He had he wasn't technically skilled, right? He couldn't do anything technically. He achieved no degrees. He has no demonstration of any technical knowledge at all. And what really bothers me, and this is not all academics, but it really bothers me, the arrogance that comes out of a person because, of how steep they are and how, nuanced they are in their field. But I'm thinking to myself, you're clueless about everything else. Point being that point of that tunnel vision, we got to step out of it. And that's why I tend to actually avoid a lot of those environments, because you could very easily get stuck into, get pulled into that type of tunnel vision. Well, remind me, what was the second thing that I said?
Honesty leads to originality.
Yeah. So invention, the mother of all invention, is necessity, right? So necessity, if we keep cutting corners, if we keep removing everything that makes us different, we're going to also remove any potential for innovation in the future. And when I talk about innovation, I mean innovation is not limited to technology, right? Innovation could be in a social field, right? It could be in other fields. So we as Muslims, we are really stuck. Whether it's our theology, if we believe in God and the Prophet and Islam and Muslims and Quran, okay, then the conservatives who are dominated by the evangelical churches, well, they definitely won't accept us, right? And if we stick to our stance with the LGBT in terms of the morality of the issue and the prohibition of the issue, okay, then mainstream, America, or the liberal side of things, mainstream, the private sector is not going to have anything to do with us. Let's be honest. But you got to live and you got to survive and you got to thrive too, right? So we have to do it. We have to find some way to do it. Innovation, people who change the world, they don't change the world because they came up with one great idea because they're really smart. Neither Albert Einstein, nor Newton, nor Edison, these are all in the field of technology, right? Nor, let's say in the social field, Malcolm X, nor Gandhi, nor Mandela, that's in the political field, right? Nor in any field were they just gifted. It wasn't just that. It's micro adjustments every day to hone their craft, right? In the realm of sports, you have Muhammad Ali, you got Tom Brady, you got Wayne Gretzky, Michael Jordan, these greats. Sports you could set aside because there's some athletic ability. It's small adjustments every year coupled with honesty, okay? And what you end up doing is you climb a hill and then you climb a mountain. And when you climb the mountain, you can now see the other side of the mountain that nobody else can see. And that's what these great leaders in every field, that's what they are. It's small adjustments. And by the way, it's not a goal to be some kind of great historical figure. I'm just saying that what it is, it's not just something that hits you like a lightning bolt. You're not born with it. These are human beings like anyone else. People like to look at the idiosyncrasies of great people, but that's not the right thing to look at. The better thing to look at is their work ethic, right? So we as Muslims, we got to be honest, but we got to move. We got to take action, and slowly our action will get better, and we're going to reach points where we make big turns, and soon we will have a community, a thing that is uniquely different, right? That has weathered different storms. But if we go the modernist route, and every time there's a tension between our religion and the society, we just cut that part off of our religion, we will be like
body with no limbs.
You're a body with no limbs. You will just dissolve into the greater society. Okay? You will be nothing. You will not be anything that anyone ever writes about. Okay? You will not be anything that's remembered, that's worth remembering. And the caterpillar is an animal that we can ponder. And Allah gives us all these animals just like He gives us lessons in the Quran. He gives us lessons in the universe. So the Quran is the book of His revelation, and the universe is like the book of another book of wisdoms. The caterpillar has to crawl out of a small cocoon, very small cocoon. And a boy one time, I don't know if this is real or this is a parable, probably one of these parables, he cut the cocoon when he saw that the caterpillar was struggling. He cut the cocoon open so that the caterpillar could get out. Well, that caterpillar stayed a caterpillar and died. It never became a butterfly, right? So the wisdom is that the hole is small because in the process of the caterpillar fighting and struggling to get through that very small hole, the nutrients all around the head of the caterpillar, they get pushed back. And those nutrients form the wings, right? So we are a people, are we stuck? We're 100% stuck. Are we in a great situation? We're in a 100% garbage situation. It is 100% difficult, okay? But by facing that reality, that's the first step out of it.
Yeah. I mean, it's like that by design, the tension, the struggle is what's going to make us great and refine. And you're right, you do see this pattern everywhere in nature, right, as a lesson. Or like, I love the analogy of blacksmithing, like the samurai sword is a gorgeous object, but when you see what it took to make that, I mean, the heat and the pounding and extracting the pure elements from the additives, and it took all that energy, and then it became this object that can slice through anything. I mean,
those swords take such a pounding, right? That I mean, why should we imagine that in the universe the human being is no different? So if you're out there, you're like a 13-year-old Muslim girl, and you're getting all this flack, right? Well, that's the pounding that it's going to take. And I teach high schoolers all the time. Right, we got youth groups, we got everything around here. So I always tell them, listen, you guys are adults, and you're going to face flack, right? And you should be honored, because the people who face flack today are the people who are going to be great tomorrow.
They're going to be the butterflies tomorrow. Inshallah.
They're going to be the butterflies tomorrow. And the opposite is the case, right? If you're handed everything to you today, you will be the losers of tomorrow. You will not be able to keep up with the people who have had to fight their whole lives, right? To scrap. I always look at the Jews, right? The Jews, if you look at the greats of today, whether it's in business, I like graphic design, right? So the top 4 graphic designers of the past century, there's like a documentary. They're all Jews, right?
Social scientists, finance, كل حاجة, yeah.
Yeah, everything. You look at these people. Well, look at how they struggled. I mean, their parents lived in a complete misery. They were mocked and bullied in Brooklyn, in wherever they were. They had to change their name. I think Jimmy K was like the first Jewish comedian that was like really made it mainstream. He had to change his name. I mean, Calvin Klein is Jewish. Ralph Lauren is Jewish. All these people changed their names, right? The designer of the IBM logo, the NBC, CBS, these like logos that are iconic, and I mean the real iconic, not today's iconic, which is like 50 shares. It's like iconic, right? The real iconic images in our society, they're all made by Jews. And if you look at it, these people struggled. They had tough lives, and that's what made them work. Right? And today, the Indians getting made fun of every day, right? Or being looked at. The Chinese struggling. Well, look at their kids. They're creaming everyone. There's not even competition, right? They are creaming everyone. And unfortunately, the Egyptian, well, you're Egyptian, right? Look, we Egyptians are, in their look, oftentimes are close to being white, okay? They're not white. They might want to think they're white. They're not white, but they try to be white in every aspect. And I'm thinking to myself, maybe, 20 years ago, that your desire to be white may have instilled in you some good work ethics, because whites used to work hard, right? But today, if you copy these people, you will have the worst parenting skills. You will have the most coddled kids, the most entitled kids, okay? And look at the results. I mean, there's not the prettiest results. When you treat kids in this fashion and you coddle them in this fashion, right? Just compare that with what the Indians and the Chinese do with their kids. Okay, and I'm not saying like they're 100% an example, but they are in some ways an example, right? Of hard work. So, you read Tiger Mom? Have you read this book?
No, sir.
Oh, you got to read this book, and you realize how soft we are. Yeah, she took it to an extreme, right? She took it to an extreme for sure. But if a person thinks about maybe 50% of what she did, right? The kids are resilient. Kids know what's good for them. And I had my son. He really didn't like my strict, no nonsense, hard-nosed approach to things. Right? I mean, who likes it? Who would like to be treated like that? Right? Well, last year in his soccer league, I mean, he was creaming everyone. Right? And I'll be the first to tell you, it's not natural skill. It was work. It was hard work. And it was just pure hard work. And he was just getting on the board and putting balls through the nets like no one else, and led the league. And I told you, look, you see now the result? And he's like, yeah, now I see the result. Right? And I could tell that he's only like 10, 11 years old. But I could tell when he's convinced. He understands the link between hard work, sacrifice, grind it out, put your nose down, be honest about your shortcomings, right? And you're going to get results. And when you see results in school, when you see results on the field, you start to believe in the process. And that's what I want for American Muslims. I mean, we need to be honest with the Quran and with the whole historical tradition. And let's be honest about something else. Do you have something else? Because I can keep going unless you want to.
Well, I did just want to kind of encapsulate one of the messages I got here, because I'm also a father, and I struggle with this, is like when to be hard, when to be soft. And I feel like there's a very special harmony between this hard work ethic, like you said, being disciplined, being tough on your kids, but you also have to have that compassion and mercy, because if you don't, as a Muslim counselor, I also see where you have parents that all they talk about is you have to succeed, and there's this like cold distance between the parents and the kids. And if it's not accompanied with that rahmah, you can actually have other dysfunction as well. They may academically be very strong, but they have intimacy disorders, or they're porn addicts, or they're, they don't know how to really love or connect to somebody. They always feel this inner, critic voice of inadequacy, because they're always trying to live up to this very exceptional perfectionist mentality, which could also lead to anxiety and OCD and all kinds of stuff. So where would you say is the sweet spot as a father to love and nourish your child, but also, put him through the ringer appropriately?
It's got to be all love, and even when you put them through the ringer, you do it with a reward at the end. Like, I'm doing this so that you can be rewarded. You're going to be given a short-term reward, and there's going to be a long-term reward. And I came up with this philosophy from how Allah treats us and motivates us. Right? Allah Ta'ala, when we are going through hardship, you make dua, right? And as soon as you make dua, you feel inside yourself a sense of serenity and calm, right? That's the first reward, right? immediately Allah rewards you. So Sayyidina Ali ibn Abi Talib said, it will never be that that you worship Allah with cash and He rewards you with credit, right? Meaning that if Allah is going to, if you do something now, don't imagine that you're going to get your reward later. You'll get it now. And the now is in the serenity of heart that comes upon a believer when he makes a dua. And we all know this, right? You go pray Taraweeh, you go pray in the masjid, you make a dua, all of a sudden you feel so great. You give charity.
Or just talking to God quietly by yourself in your room and just being sincere with that presence of Allah, right?
Yes. And just even it crossing your mind, how amazing is this Creator, and how I should, seek some istighfar for this, what I'm doing, right? Just that by itself, immediately you're rewarded with serenity. So when I've come, and I'm not some kind of parenting expert, by the way, let me just tell you, and I even tell my kids, I'm actually pretty mean and nasty sometimes, but I tell them, look, I just want you to know, Allah and His Prophet, they're not like me. They're a lot kinder and nicer than me, right? So that, because they see me as the sheikh, right? They see me as a sheikh, and that's how they know me. In when I go to the masjid, like, our dad's the sheikh, so that's what I symbolize to them. Okay, so I want to make sure that they don't get the wrong image, but I came up with this concept that any time I put them through the ringer, they're gonna get rewarded in the present, immediately, in the short term, right? And they're gonna be rewarded in the long term, right? And that has really changed everything. That has made them desire to do the rigorous activities that I want them to do, whether it's math sheets or hifz of Quran or training, like physical training, like running. They've responded really well to that, right? And one time, my youngest daughter, right, she was one time playing on my lap and playing with my beard, and she's looking at some of the other pictures of shuyukh that she's seen, and she's comparing the beards, and she turns and she says, Baba, well, when are you going to be a real sheikh and have a beard? And so they actually know. It's amazing, because sometimes we have real shuyukh come to our masajid and visit. So, and it's funny because one time one of them said, is the guest coming like a real sheikh or like you? So it was really funny to how kids bring it out, and they know, and we aren't real sheikhs. We're just like filler. And we're scrappers and strugglers and grinders until, and if ever, the real deal comes around. And I'm talking about shuyukh with knowledge and evidence and wisdom and hifz of Quran and everything that is the description of a quote unquote real sheikh, right? So, and anyway, what you were saying is that it's got to be in the present and in the future, right? So that's how I think. And the love is all the time. Really, it's got to be all the time. And what Sheikh Abdurrahman al-Shahuri said, that his description was that whenever he got angry with someone, his anger was very short. And that's one thing that, alhamdulillah, my dad actually used to do this with me too. He never drags on an issue.
No grudges or anything like that.
No, nothing like that. You never drag on an issue. And when people drag on an issue,
just turns into resentment.
Oh man, it becomes an issue. And here's the other thing too: temperaments. People are created with different temperaments. Like, I like gritty go-getters. I don't like people with who are really gifted and life comes easy to them. It bothers me. I like people who have confidence, who go on the attack. Right? It bothers me someone who is soft. However, Allah may give you a child who's soft, right? That the idea for him to be aggressive is just repulsive. Doesn't like it, right? Exact opposite. I say to myself, subhanAllah, this is so you know that your personality is not some absolute truth. It's just your personality. So you have to come to love and appreciate the opposite temperaments of people, and pull yourself to the middle and pull them up to the middle. Like the Prophet ﷺ said to Sayyidina Umar, he said, "Yeah, Umar, why do you pray tahajjud out loud?" He said, "To wake up the sleeping, to wake up the sleeping, and to expel shaitan." And then he said, he said that to Umar. He said, "Ya Abu Bakr, why do you pray tahajjud so quietly?" He said, "Because it's a private munajat between me and Allah." So the Prophet ﷺ then said, "Oh Umar, lower your voice a little bit. And oh Abu Bakr, raise your voice a little bit." Meaning that human beings are created with temperaments, and for every human being should gravitate somewhat to the middle, right? So that you can relate what happens if Allah tests you with a child the exact opposite temperament as you. And many, many parents fall into that, and they just have a clash that will never end with their kids. You're a counselor, and you've seen that, right? And it's just a never-ending clash. And what you realize is deep down, the parent hates the temperament of his kid.
Right. And they struggle to always make them more like themselves, rather than, like you said, both of them adjusting and tuning into the middle.
Yes. And I used to tell them, look at the Sahaba. Sayyidina Umar and Sayyidina Abu Bakr were very different. Sayyidina Uthman and Sayyidina Ali were completely different, right? Sayyidina Abdurrahman ibn Auf and Sayyidina Abu Dharr al-Ghifari were completely different, right? So, and all those the Prophet loved. And Sayyidina Sulaiman was different from Sayyidina Dawood. Sayyidina Dawood was like Sayyidina Ali. And Sayyidina Sulaiman was like Sayyidina Uthman, right? So, look at these and look how they're different. And the parent should come to genuinely love the different attributes. And look at the animals. The animals Allah created, there are predators and there are prey. The predator is not categorically better than the prey, right? I mean, some predators, so predators, they're exemplary in some respects, and prey are exemplary in some respects. Like the buck. To me, the buck is a noble animal, beautiful animal. He's not some kind of pushover, but he's not a herbivore. I mean, he's not a carnivore, right? And the hyena is a ugly, vicious, filthy predator. So there are some predators that are filthy, and there are some carnivores that are filthy, and some herbivores that are exemplary. Everything that I've ever had to do, I've never walked into any space, whether it's the classroom, the masjid, or the rink, or the field, or like the sporting wherever, where anyone has looked and said, "Well, this is the guy who's going to do it." Right? I've never had that. In fact, it was the opposite. Whenever I played hockey, whenever I walked into the locker room or looked at the warm-ups, right? I would see guys pretty much like maybe have a good 6-7 inches on me, and a good 6-7 inches wide on me too. And I'm thinking to myself, how in the world am I even in the same league as these guys? These guys are huge, right? And, hockey's a game of inches, right? And you get pushed around. And the amazing thing is that I really looked on, I'm like, I don't even know how I'm in the same league. Why am I even going to try? But that's why I always say when the rubber hits the road, everything changes, right? Because when the rubber hits the road, I've never failed in any field in any endeavor that I went after, right? So in hockey, I would come in the middle of the game, and I can't believe I'm actually competing with these guys and outdoing them, playing better than them, right? And it's about persistence, it's about smarts, it's about preparing, and it's about not being afraid, right? And in that field, sports is an awesome field because it gives you a scoreboard. Most of life doesn't give you a scoreboard. So having had that scoreboard, to me, it's a proof, it's a testimony, never to be intimidated. Like when I look at liberals and I look at these political movements, all I do is think about I played against guys who were like 6'3". I played against guys who were like 280 pounds. I competed against them. I knocked them on the rear ends because I wanted it more, right? And I battled, and I took sticks to the throat and hits to the head and to the face, and I had no problem with it. I get back up and I do it again. And when I look at the zeitgeist of the liberals, right, and I'm not intimidated, right? And that's why I think sports is actually a lot of lessons you can learn in sports.
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. Dr. Shadee, how are we doing on time? Shaizin akhar عليك.
Yeah, I'm up to what you're up to, so I could go on. You're gonna have to stop me when it comes to talking. You're gonna have to stop me. When I was in grade school, all my report cards said needs improvement for excessive talking. Right? So it actually became my job. My job is to talk. So
worked out for you.
You're going to have to stop me because I can just keep going.
Okay, what I'd love to do is go to our next segment, which is I want to share with you that McDonald's story, which I told you I'd share. And then that can lead to, maybe I'd love to hear a little bit more about this wonderful book that you're putting together and what are the benefits of living with Allah's names and attributes in our daily lives. And maybe you can give us 2 to 3 tips on how we can really internalize and embody and practice that. Mm-hmm. Okay, so that story about McDonald's, going back to this idea of, no happiness allowed in some of our, community settings. I remember a true story. I was about 7 years old, and I used to go to this halaqah with some teachers that were, let's say, no happiness allowed types, right? And one day I came back from a summer in Egypt, and I was... I had this silver bracelet with my name on it. I don't know if you remember. It's kind of trendy back in the 80s and 90s.
Like they etched it in cursive or whatever. I had one of those.
Yeah. So I had one of those, and the teacher, immediately is just like, Karim, what is this? I said, it's, he's like, is this jewelry? And I said, yeah. He said, didn't I tell you jewelry is haram? I said, but it's silver. Boys are allowed to wear silver. My grandma got it for me for my birthday. And he's like, didn't I tell you birthdays are haram?
Oh, my God.
I said, but Sheikh, all we did was go to McDonald's and eat chicken nuggets. And he said, didn't I tell you McDonald's was haram? So it was like 3 strikes, man, in less than 10 seconds. But that story just kind of reminded me of, earlier we were discussing it's so important to revive this sense of happiness and joy and color in our deen and in our practice. And certainly one of the ways to get there is to truly know and be able to properly conceptualize, if you even want to use that word, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because, I know that the more I learn about the names and attributes of God and how they manifest, it does give you a clearer sense of how to construct the world. Yep. And if the pinnacle of being a believer, is muhsin, excellence, right? Living with this excellence and worshiping God as though you see him, even though you don't, he sees you. How can we love Allah, which is mentioned in the Quran, right? وَالَّذِينَ آمَنُوا أَشَدُّ حُبٌّ لِلَّهِ, for example, in Surah Al-Baqarah. How do we love God if we don't know his names and attributes? Because if I told you I'm in love with Maryam, the first thing I'm going to say is, what do you love about her? And I'm going to describe her attributes, right? I'm not going to talk about all the things I don't like. I'm going to talk about the things I actually like, right? Yeah. So one of the keys to loving Allah and having that intimate connection with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is we have to know his names and attributes. And perhaps this is one of your intentions for this upcoming book that I'd love you to tell us more about.
Well, the Galaxy of Divine Love is exactly what you just said. How are we supposed to have any sacrifice, make any sacrifice for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala when we ourselves have no clue of anything about him? And yeah, okay, he's one God. Well, what else? So the idea behind this book is to simply collect, because how do you know Allah? From what Allah revealed about himself, right? That's the only way to know him. The intellect can tell us that there's a creator, that is living, that he is we know that he's alive by we know that he's willful by the existence of specification and variation in the creation. We know that he is one because of order in creation. We know that he has knowledge because of complexity in creation. So there are certain things, and we know that he's alive because nothing that has knowledge and creates life is a prerequisite to that. Okay, so, and we know that he is hearing and seeing and can communicate, because the opposite of that are defects, right? And we know that we know these basic things. So we need to know more, and by studying the attributes of Allah Ta'ala, you get to look at this amazing textured descriptions. Like, for example, Khaliq, Al-Khaliq, Al-Bari', Al-Musawwir, right? These are all names of creation, but they're different. Al-Khaliq implies in it that his creation from nothing. It's the nothingness that's the key, right? Al-Bari' is the initiator, is a subtlety in that name that points to the engineering of the creation, right? So that when people open up the human body, like in medical school, they open up the human body and they look at what's going on here, and the complexity meaning that many things need to come together at once in certain conditions, each one of them by themselves, or if you remove one of them, everything is useless. So like the eye is like that. The pen, just like a pen. Take an example of a pen. The ink by itself is useless, right? The little plastic tube is useless. The spring that's on the clicking part is useless. The point is useless. The cap is useless. But when you put them all together in the right temperature, at the right time, in the right tension, then it becomes a useful tool. So that's called complexity. So al-Bari' points to the complexity of the khalq, of the engineering of the creation. Okay? That there is knowledge involved, that there are details involved. And al-Musawwir points to the beauty, because everything has form and function, right? So it points to the beauty of the creation. And then you have a name like al-Wajid. Well, what's the difference between al-Khaliq and al-Wajid? Al-Wajid points to that Allah Ta'ala can create from what you never imagined. Okay? Min haythu la tahtasib. Right? So he can create out of something that you've never imagined. Situations of greatness that come out of misery. And Allah says, "Min bayni farthin wa damin labanan khalisa." Like in an animal, between where there's blood and there's filth, pure milk comes out. Right?
Wow.
So you have amazing, beautiful names like Al-Alim, Al-Khabir, Al-Hafid, Al-Shahid, Al-Muhsi. So Al-Alim, the most knowledgeable, is the all-encompassing name for having knowledge. So what's the difference between Al-Khabir? Al-Khabir is more specific, and it has to do with that which is hidden, because Al-Akhbar, Al-Khabar, is that which you didn't see, someone else saw.
Or didn't know about.
Yes, and someone else saw. It's not knowable to you. So that we listen to the news to hear what's not knowable to us. So Al-Khabir points to that Allah informs us of what is not knowable to us, right? Like how we were created, or where we're going after death. These things are not knowable to the human being without Allah informing us. And then you have Al-Hafidh. Al-Hafidh is that which has to do with that which is minute in its details. Okay? Minute in its details. So the knowledge of little things like the grains of sand or the ants walking in the earth, things like this that you would never have imagined, okay, that were knowable. Well, to him they're knowable. Well, what does that do for us? Well, what it does for you, if Allah is aware of every snowflake that falls on the ground, well, what does it tell you about you yourself, who is a superior creature than a snowflake? Or what does that tell you? If Allah has created every snowflake with its own pattern, well, then how special are you, right? As a human being, right? Which is a superior thing than a snowflake. And then you have, the different names have different shades. Okay, so, and by the way, I want to say something else. We don't know Allah Ta'ala just by knowing the names is one thing, right? But meeting awliya is something that is non-existent, because the discourse in America, maybe for some whatever reason, it's just not there to say that. But there are in this world salihin, awliya salihin, who, if you sit in their presence, you know that this person has embodied the shama'il of the Prophet ﷺ, and you can feel a presence. They are those who have excelled in ibadah. in dhikrillah, they have excelled. And because of the dhikr that they've done, it has affected them. It's almost like, look, if you eat certain foods, certain scents come out of you, right? If you put on certain perfumes, certain good scents come out of you. If you do certain adhkar, it's a reality. If you do much dhikr, certain aura of serenity emits from that person. If people have strived 20 and 30 years to embody the life of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the akhlaq of the Prophet, you can tell. We call these people awliya and it's a suggestive term, meaning nahsabuhum min al-awliya. In our estimation. Now, some people say, can you say in my estimation someone's a wali? Of course you can. Why else would Allah describe the awliya to us in the Quran? Every sifa, every description of a believer, right? And all the descriptions of the salihin and the awliya, why has Allah given them to us? So that we can identify them when we see them in people. Just like Allah has gave us the description of the kafirin, fasiqeen, munafiqeen. There are three different classes of people, right? The kafir is a kafir, he's your enemy in deen and dunya. The munafiq is someone who is the trickiest person to identify. The fasiq, he's a Muslim like you and a mu'min like you, but he's a bad sinner. Okay, he sins badly. So why has Allah given us these descriptions? So that we can say, in my estimation, the signs of hypocrisy are manifesting right now, right? And the opposite, that when we see the salihin and awliya, we say, wallahi, the signs of wilaya are on this person. And Allah knows best. So that, to be honest with you, meeting the awliya, meeting these people, you can't dismiss it as a source of certainty in iman. So Galaxy of Divine Love, that book is going to begin with the 99 names. It's going to have in it all of the hadith Qudsi. It's going to have all the stories of Musa speaking to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then it's going to have a section on stories of the awliya.
Beautiful.
Because if you can't see them, if you can't meet them, then at least read
about them.
Yeah.
MashaAllah.
Yeah. I mean, it's not something that's it's one of those books that I, get to every once in a while, and it's, it'll be compiled over the years, and it'll come out one day. One of those.
But those sometimes are the best books, just like the best meals. Like you said, it's simmering and cooking
exactly.
slowly.
It's got to simmer. It's got to cook slowly, and bi'idhnillah, that's the idea, because we have something to offer. We're not just critics of the liberals. The liberals, it's really just a waste of time. We have something to offer. We have a lot to offer. Our ulama have shown us that there's something called wilayat, to be a wali of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? And we have something to offer the society. We have the power, the ability, the wealth, the motivation to be the most giving, generous group of people in America. And it's not that we should consider ourselves that we are, we should be embarrassed until the day that there are more Muslim-owned food pantries, right, in the cities than there are Catholic food pantries.
Mm.
Really, we should really just think about this. We should be the most generous people. Instead, what are we doing? We're trying to be accepted. We're trying to be, have more politicians, right? I mean, you want Muslim politicians? Go to Cairo. They're all Muslim there.
Yeah. No, it's a very interesting point because I know some brothers who have done, work in remote places like in Africa, for example, and this, they go and visit and they tell me, like the Catholics have been here for 20 years. Yeah. Right. Yeah. And they are the ones feeding them and giving them toys. And this is why they're influenced. Right. It's like, and the Muslims are one border over and they're not here.
No.
The other thing I heard you say is, the awliya is a real thing and it's a sign of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And I've met converts, for example, and other people that, when I ask sometimes you're like, oh, what's your conversion story? It's like, I met this individual, this sheikh or this imam, and for the first time in my life, I recognized what a human being was supposed to be. Just like that. No, nothing was said, even hatta. You know, it was just the mood of the person, the presence. It just, you know, other times you meet someone and you feel that tranquility and sakina, and they don't have to say anything. It's that energy coming from the heart, right? If you want to call it that. And so there is a reality to this, and that's one of the ways that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala manifests His beauty and His greatness when we embody the hidayah of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, or all of the prophets. The last point I took away from your sharing is another powerful mechanism of being awed by the beauty of Allah is studying creation itself. Because I know when I watch these like documentaries, Dr. Shadee, on like how the galaxy works, or, you know, planet Earth and these types of things, you just sit back and you're like, subhanallah, like look at what Allah has done and how He has set all of this creation in this order. And if you spend all your life looking at Facebook and that's all you know, how are you going to tap into that greater majesty and beauty that you're swimming in all around you? You're just not seeing it, you know? And
it also gives you that the Muslims, we're not in the minority, we're actually in the majority, because creation is on the fitrah, right? Creation has been as it has forever. In the sense, the sun's been the sun, the moon has been the moon, right? And that
the trees, the animals,
the trees. Yeah. We are not outnumbered. The khalq outside there is on the same path. They are in obedience to Allah Ta'ala. It's the disorder is in the realm of the creature that has will. The creature, you know, the human being is where disorder is at. Everything else is in order.
SubhanAllah.
Right. So it's
when we choose to reject being in harmony with that.
Yeah, and it's like everything about the universe is in perfect harmony. If they say, well, what about volcanoes and earthquakes and storms? Seems very disruptive. It's not disruptive at all, right? I mean, if you're a little piece of lice and a human in the hair of a child, and then the dad says, hey, son, let's get a crew cut. And then you go and shave off all the hair, and you're that piece of lice that gets caught between the razors, right, of the razor, right, that gave that kid a crew cut. In the little universe of that piece of lice, that was Judgment Day. That was the apocalypse, okay? So we humans, when we look out, and some atheists say, well, if this world is so, you claim that it's all order, then why are there earthquakes? We say to you, in your view, because you're such a small creature, you think this earthquake is bad, right? This earthquake may be great for the earth. Oh, okay. And then they say, well, why did all these people die? Well, because you built your city on it. No one told you to build your city there, right? So whenever we view nature as being bad, as being disorderly, as being chaotic, as being violent, it's all in respect to the perspective of the human being, right? In itself, that earthquake may be perfect for the earth. The volcano is no different, really, than you spitting up, having an acid reflux, right? It's the earth like having an acid reflux. It's good for it, right? So the point I'm saying is that everything in nature is orderly. Even if we think it's not orderly, well, it's 100% orderly. And anything negative is from our perspective, right? And our perspective is really, I mean, what gives it any more worth than anything else? So that's only in our perspective. So being out in nature, to me, is so important for us to American Muslims, because the fitrah is something that could be twisted and it could be corrupted, right? And there are ideas out there that are corrupting our fitrah. The internet is the biggest corrupter of the fitrah, right? I mean, you brought up the subject of pornography addiction. I mean, this thing is so prevalent in the world today that honestly, wherever you travel, the internet is there, right? And the world today is so connected that I actually believe, my philosophy is that the only real, the idea of disconnecting, all you have to do is you don't have to go anywhere. Just take your computer, right? And, put it somewhere else for the day, and your cell phone, and live offline for the day. You'll feel really disconnected. And it'll be a purifying, habit to do, to get offline, to be disconnected for a couple days, a week, as a habit.
Akramakumullah, Dr. Shadee. I don't want to eat all the honey out of the jar today, because I want to have you back on again soon. Thank you so much for your time today and your valuable feedback, and may Allah bless you and your family and give you tawfiq in your new book, and inshallah we'll have you on again soon to discuss some more topics, bi'idhnillah.
Well, thank you, and it was great to be on, and I know that sometimes I take the liberty in these sort of relaxed podcast episodes to go from subject to subject to subject, and I think that hopefully that wasn't a problem.
I'm sure everyone will enjoy it.
Alhamdulillah. Alhamdulillah. It was great talking to you, and inshallah good luck with the podcast.
Thank you, sir.
And inshallah we'll come on another time.